Hey guys, we're back with Nick and we're gonna speak more on magic.
Hmm.
Yeah. What do you have for us today?
All right. So last week we talked about the law of gender and how that those two things play into role. So to this week we're going to talk about something that is arguably probably one of the more important ones, or probably one of the first things like anyone's probably going to think about. Is also another reason why I highly encourage, and if not say would be required to be a mystic first. So we're going to talk about the law of correspondences. So again, another reason why I mentioned mysticism before is because in mysticism you also study astrology. Now, granted, sure, even if you don't become a mystic first and you decide to go straight into occultism and magic, yeah, you'll probably end up learning this stuff anyway. Of course, the other reason why, well, aside from learning the astrology first, as well as all of its respecting correspondences, is also important to learn astrotheology, because in astrotheology you get to learn these archetypes, these correspondences on a much deeper level, and also develop a reverence for them. And yeah, and of course, the one of the biggest components in doing magic as well is not just knowing the steps, having the form and the logic, and understanding the basic rudimentary connections, also having that emotional fuel adding to it, which of course is going to be would be in the form of reverence to these archetypes. So, for example, like if you want to really invoke protection, you would be invoking Jupiter, and Jupiter, of course, in many, whether in astrology or magic, Jupiter is the shield, whereas Mars is the sword. Mercury is the communicator as well. The sun, of course, is the heart. So when doing any kind of magic, and of course, it's not just planet the wandering stars that we're looking at. We're also looking at things like the signs, right? So, for example, if you want to do something like, say, money magic, for example, you'll probably be invoking not just either Jupiter or Venus, but you can also be invoking Taurus too, which is fixed Earth. And if for whatever reason, if sometimes like if you're not having luck with Taurus, you would also be looking at, say, Capricorn, which is mutable Earth. Or sorry, cardinal Earth, not mutable. I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. Would be cardinal Earth, which is that cardinal energy is good for sparking things, for starting things. So it's great if you're trying to do that.
Cancer too.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Yeah. So I'm also gonna read more from the Kybalion. The Kybalion. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. More on the law of correspondence. So, as quoted here, as above, so below. Oh, as below, so above. As within, so without. So, the principle embodies the truth that there is always a correspondence between the laws and phenomena of the various planes of being and life. The Hermetic axiom ran in these words: as above, so below, as below, so above. I don't know why it's saying it like that, but that's okay. And the grasping of this principle gives one the means to solve many a dark paradox, the hidden secret of nature. There are planes beyond our knowing, but when we apply the principle of correspondence to them, we are able to understand much that would otherwise be unknowable to us. This principle is of universal application and manifestation. On the various planes of the material, mental, and spiritual universe, it is a universal law. The ancient Hermeticists consider this principle as one of the most important mental instruments by which man was able to pry aside the obstacles which hid from view the unknown. Its use even tore aside the veil of Isis to the extent of that of a glimpse of the face of the goddess might be caught. Just as a knowledge of the principles of geometry enables man to measure distant suns and their movements while seated in his observatory, so a knowledge of the principle of correspondence enables man to reason intelligently from the known to the unknown. Studying the monad, he understands the archangel. So I stated here, yeah. So when it comes to any kind of ritual, any kind of spell work that you're doing, correspondence is key, because as stated, as above, so below, as within, so without. These powers exist above us, as you will know in astrology and astrotheology, but these also exist within us. This is, part of the reason why we're able to do magic to be in. This is like one of those chords that we learn. So we all have the principle of Jupiter within us. We all have the principle of Saturn, Mars, Venus, Sun, Moon, Mercury, etc. But so when we do magic, we're really calling upon these powers to do things. So when we want to expand something, yes, Jupiter. When we want to constrict something, Saturn. When we want to establish some kind of communication, we go with Mercury. And some people would even call it Hermes. Jupiter can also be known as Zeus. Others will see it as Jesus. Well, I mean, they're both one and the same. If you're looking at Saturn, you're also looking at Kronos, you're also looking at Christ. So whenever you want to do anything, you learn how to pick and pluck from each of these connections, each of these powers, and place them in the right place so you can get the effect that you want. So this is the part where, if you have a creative mind, you can see all sorts of possibilities that can come from this. So even understanding how each of these powers are linked to the days, so Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, so that'd be, Sun, Moon, and Mars, to even the planetary hours. So which time of the day would be best to utilize in conjunction with the day itself. So with that in mind, you can literally just configure whatever ritual, whatever spell into whatever you want, as I've already said. And it's also important to even understand, even just looking at rituals that have already been made, allows you to understand how those work too. So especially in, say, the Lesser Bandage ritual, the pentagram, which we'll go over in a future episode and dedicate one to it, because it's a ritual I would highly, highly, highly recommend to do. I can speak from personal experiences on the changes it brought to my life. So even within these rituals that have been practiced and done for many, many years by a variety of different magicians, you'll even see them like, oh, hey, so in Banishing Ritual, the pentagram, and again, we'll go over this in more detail. You'll start by facing east, which east is associated with the element of air. And you also invoke the archangel Raphael, which is also associated with Mercury, or Hermes, which is also the magician. When we typically, in high ceremony magic, you typically start by facing the east, right? Because that's the power first you want to bring in. And of course, you'll notice how, like, in a lot of rituals, you end up using your hands too, which is, Mercury associated with Gemini. Again, another reason why it's important to understand this. And of course, all the movements that you do, as well as the lungs, so a lot of breathing exercises, even chantings, singing even. And through that's how we start accessing everything else. So again, right there, Mercury, messenger of the gods, that's going to go everywhere. Right?
Yeah.
So, and of course, like, there's even the elements too. Like I mentioned before with Taurus, you got fixed earth, and you got Capricorn with cardinal earth. Same thing applies to other signs as well. So you got cardinal fire, you got fixed fire, you got cardinal air, mutable earth. Like, all these different elements come in and can have different uses. So, and yeah, this is the part where I even mentioned before how, like, once you understand this part, suddenly opportunities open. You have doors that you didn't even realize existed before are now swinging wide open. The only thing you got to do is to start putting in the work.
Yeah. Like, even when we choose our time to meet, you look at the chart ahead of time just to see like what's going on right.
And for this case, it'd be Cancer Moon. So of course, Moon being domicile in Cancer, and of course, Moon being extremely important in magic. That side today was pretty good. I don't remember the other aspects to it too, but
right.
And of course, this is important to even the astrologer would know would typically, if there's something big and important coming up, it was like, hey, let's take a look at the transits. Let's see what's going on. Is there something we got to watch out for? Is Mercury retrograde? Is maybe this aspect going on? These are always going to be important. And as well as, like I mentioned with the moon, which is going to be extremely vital to understand and know. We'll go over more in the future, or at least reiterate some of it, is understanding what sign the moon is in, which can determine, the general theme of what you can target. Like, say, for example, so it's Cancer, right? So that'd be a lot with the home. Could even be with, say, motherhood as well. If say the moon is in, let's say, Capricorn, that can definitely be used for, again, for wealth. Could also be for
business.
Yeah, business too. And if you move it to, again, any of the signs, you can, if you know an astrologer, then you can immediately know. It's like, oh yeah, that's right. Just take the theme of the sign that the moon is in. That's the kind of thing you can start to learn. And of course, afterwards, you have to look, all right, so is the moon waning or waxing? This will also determine if it's going to be a good day for pushing something away. So in which case you'd be doing black magic if it's waning. And if it's waxing, that's a great thing for pulling. So you'd be doing white magic. Okay, so, and there's another reason why, this goes back to the whole law of polarity as well, is, this will play into account. And it's why, it's also important to understand that despite everything we've always heard about black magic, it's not all bad. Because otherwise, if you're stuck with the whole black magic is always bad, white magic is good, you should only do white magic, then of course you only be able to do magic for one half of the month. The other half, you're stuck. You can't do anything.
Because when the moon is waning, it's black magic. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Waxing is white. Okay.
Yeah. Well, it's also good.
It wanes, just for clarity for everyone, it wanes for half the month. It wanes for 15 days, starting right after the full moon, straight to the new moon. It's decreasing, waning, waning, decreasing, and decreasing in light. And then it gets to the new moon, and then it starts waxing on.
Yeah.
And building and growing.
Building more light, which makes sense. It is the building the light, bringing in the white magic.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, it should also be said that even though what I just said, waning black, waxing white, some people might say it's like, oh, what if you tried doing magic in the wrong one? Now, will it still work? It still has the potential to work, right? It's not to say that you can never do the opposite type. It's just, you just keep in mind that you will be swimming against the current if you do that. So your success may vary to the point of either it doesn't work or you only get diminished results. So of course, keep that in mind.
Yeah. So for anybody out there that's like, oh, I don't know about this black magic thing yet, right? And they're kind of like, I guess the white magic you could still do that even when the moon is waning, but like you just said, it won't have as much potency.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And another key important fact, we're going to go over this again when we talk more about the moon, is also understanding when the moon is void of course. Now, when does that mean is void of course? For those who don't know, it just means when the moon is moving through the signs, obviously because how fast it moves, it typically generates a lot of new aspects as it goes through. And when it already reaches that last aspect and it doesn't have any more aspect before it changes, that's when the moon is void of course. What this means is that during this period, it's not really recommended to do magic. Again, you can still do it, but the thing is, during this period, you can say the environment or the lunar energies are going to be very unstable or very shifting. So again, you can still try, but however, again, your results might vary to the point of either not working or being very diminished, or can get a little bit chaotic. So always keep an eye on when those periods start.
Wow, so it's like the moon doesn't have any stability, any assistance, any connection to any planet. So void of course is when it has no aspects to any planets. Okay, so that would mean, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of it still has aspects, but it won't have any new aspects to go to. So say when it goes through a sign, it will go through it will aspect Mercury, then it'll aspect Venus, then the sun. And if the sun is the last aspect it gets before it enters the next sign, then it's when it's void of course. I hope I'm explaining that correctly. So then when it enters a new sign, then it exits the void of course. Yeah. One thing I would recommend is to, again, I really hope I explained that correctly, but usually to find out whether or not the moon is void, of course, you can always look up online. There's void of course calendars on a variety of different websites. Just search it up on Google or whatever search engine you do, and yeah, you can see like when it starts and when it ends. So very useful tool to have.
Seems like the moon is the main player in this magic.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. Yeah, because of course the moon is associated with the ovaries. It's the portal that entering it to bring things in, and of course that's what we do in magic. We're trying to bring things into manifestation. Of course, moon being that entry portal is going to be the big focus. It's also the reason why you got practices like in Wicca and witchcraft, why they have such a huge focus on the moon. They're always keeping an eye on it, like where does it go? And even in gardening as well, for those who don't know, it's can be very helpful to know, like, well, when's a good time to plant something, when's a good time to not plant something as well. So yeah, the moon is very influential. It governs our emotions as well, our subconscious, our habits. Well, yeah.
Yeah, and she's Mary Magdalene, Magick.
Yes.
Magnetism.
Yeah. Yeah, so very, very vital, very important. So yeah, and correspondences, of course, very simple, very straightforward to understand, but of course, heavily important, and probably one of the first things you do. Like every time you, again, this is a good thing to practice, even as as astrologers. You probably might end up doing this anyway. Where every time you look at something, you'll be like, oh, hey, that's the Jupiterian aspect of that, of whatever it is you're looking at, and it's going to definitely be important in magic too, because as you go out through life, especially when you look at literally anything, right? You can start to see like, oh, hey, look, that part of it is the Jupiterian, that part's the solar, that part's the lunar, right? So this will be very good practice. And seeing those things play out in the world as well, even how other people use it too, especially in advertisements. You will see these things too. You'll see it's like, oh, hey, you have Mercury jumping around there. You'll have Mars playing out there. And even in stories too, like the heroes, the sun, right? It's the heart of the show. And followed by, say, Saturn, which is going to be like the opposer, the villain, the one that will try to stop the hero or slow him down. These archetypes are everywhere. They're always at play.
They're even in like vehicles.
Yeah.
Like what one is Mars? Volvo, the symbol for Volvo.
Yeah.
Mars
rules the genitals, the vulva.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and you can have the car brand Ram. That should be pretty easy to figure out which sign that's associated with. But of course, for those who don't know, that'd be with Aries.
Yeah, and then Chevrolet. I find Aries are always fascinated with Chevrolet, and it's because it's the cross laminate, the lamb, and
the symbol.
The symbol Chevy is the cross, and Aries is right there at the beginning of the cross.
Yes. Yeah. I was going to say something. I forget what it was. I think it's something to do with Aries, the ram, the head. So like always moving fast. So yeah, you probably want that on a car. And even if you get these correspondences as well, say for example, here's an idea if anyone wants to use it. Is say if you want to get a specific car, right? Maybe if you want to associate, say for example, the Ram brand, you can even associate, literally the Ram, put an Aries in whatever ritual you want to make. So if you're making a sigil, you want that kind of car, you could implement the symbol of Aries in there. And actually it brings me to my next point here when it comes to symbolism as well, which is really what I've been talking about this whole time, right? And it's also the reason correspondences is also the reason why in any kind of magic and ritual, why we have all these props, why we wear these robes, why we have athames, which are like these ritual daggers, which is Mars, why we have magic wands, why we draw sigils to begin with, why we light certain candles with certain colors, why we place them in certain positions, why we face the east first and then rotate around and face each direction of, depending on what kind of element we want to try to invoke, right? Because deep down we all know these things. These things can be completely viewed as universal symbolism. So like the astrological signs, like I mentioned, because these are things that we all can connect to, we all can recognize, even if not consciously, subconsciously, the knowledge is there, that connection is there, right? Of course, we also have things like personal symbolism, which is obviously, like the term would imply, it's something that's more, directly connected to individuals. So for some people, it's just make an example. Let's just say a cup of green tea. I'm just making a pure example here. Is for someone always associates with love, right? So like if someone wants to try to bring in more love in their life, it's like, oh, I'll just incorporate a cup of green tea in my ritual. For anyone else, a green tea may not bring that kind of thing. Could even bring something completely different. But for that person, that could be associated with that love. And in many ways, that would still work, because green can also be associated with the color of Venus, or the color of Venus, the planet Venus as well, or even the sun too. Right. So in a way, that would still work.
Yeah.
And of course, and each of the planets as well, speaking of colors, and it may seem confusing at first, right? Because most people would think it's like, oh, this planet only has that one color. And if you try to put that color means that color, well, not necessarily true, because you got Mars can either have the color red or the color blue. Like I just mentioned, the sun can have the color yellow or gold or green, especially with its connection with the hearts, which is the heart chakra, which has the color green. Got Venus too, could have green as well, or could have yellow, right? Or like a coppery color.
Right.
Yeah. So
yeah,
there's
not just like so black or white. There's like open space for it. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Was there anything else I was going to cover in correspondences? It actually might be it for correspondences. So
okay.
Yeah. So the next one, as well, since we have plenty of time for it, is the law of cause and effect. So, like with anything in, like most things here in this life, like when something happens, usually as a result of something else, right? Cause and magic here as well, and it has a bit of a relationship to the law of polarity, and I'll get to why. So, as magicians, as anyone who is trying to influence the world around us, the one thing that we always want to do is always try to be the cause of things, right? So when you change something, so say if you light a candle, what's the cause of that? Well, you were, right? Because you lit the candle on fire. That's why it's on fire. And then, yeah, that might be like a very simple thing to understand, but it's still important to keep in mind. As with reference to the law of polarity, how we talked about being polarized. So polarization as well plays a part into this, because when you're polarized towards something, whatever that could be, whether it's politics, a team, music, any kind of concept, right? Anything that can pull you. Of course, you can move yourself through polarization, but at the same time, so can other things, which is why I always say, even if you're not completely depolarized, because the magician is depolarized, may not necessarily in the extreme totalitarian way, because then at that point you just be flat out dead. Nothing would move you, but neither can you move yourself. But for the things that we are polarized to, it's important to keep an eye on those things, how they polarize, because when someone is able to pull you, you become under the effect of someone else's spell, or actions, and however you want to look at it. As a magician, we don't want to do that. The whole point of being a magician is to be in control of yourself, right? And of course, control of your own reality, which sometimes can be tricky because we're always dealing with, other players too, other influences as well. Some things are easily avoided, other things maybe not so much. And at that point, what we would deal with is simply working around them. So again, I'll read again from the Kybalion here.
And like not to like ruin interrupt, but as far as like working with the energies around us, is that where you could do like a banishing ritual to help? Like,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We just like, so things like the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, which again, we'll have an episode dedicated to that because I highly recommend it. And yeah, because we're always, as we go through life, we're always building up these energies, right? Sometimes we go through things, we pick things up even unintentionally, and it gets placed into our subconscious, and that can be a good or a bad thing depending on what it is. Unfortunately, in the world we live in today, and of course it could vary depending on what part of the world you live in. Most of the time, it's not necessarily a good thing, whether it's from other people around you, whether it's from seeing something in the background. These things build up over time, they get ingrained and rooted. So of course you want to clear that out, because of course, banishing will always clean the slate. We also got things like banishing ritual of the hexagram, which is more on the planetary influences, whereas the pentagram, which is more elemental in nature, like air, fire, water, earth. It focuses more on the inner planes. It can still affect the physical plane in some regard. For example, because of course one of the elements is of course fire, and one of the most common forms of magic is candle magic. So obviously there's going to be a lot of fire involved. It's also great for protecting from any mishaps that could happen, which when it comes to working with candle magic, normally, and this is probably common sense for many people, always adhere to fire safety as well when working with any kind of fire, whether you have a campfire, candles in your house, etc. But it's especially important in magic because when you're working with fire, like magic, you're pulling the very strings of the universe, right? You are changing things in ways that normally would not happen. So of course, fire having that intrinsic connection to the more ethereal realms, it is like a portal, much like water is, except of course fire is far more intense. You'll notice sometimes things can get very anomalous with it too, where it will act in certain ways where normally would not. So the banishing the element of fire can be very helpful in sort of containing it, right? Yeah, because here's one example, like a story that I heard is that when someone that was trying to, I believe it was a 7-day uncrossing ritual, where part of that ritual they were using a black candle, right? And they placed it in a glass votive candle holder, right? And while it was there at some point, since black, the color itself, is very good at absorbing negative energy, all that negative energy going right into the candle, the glass couldn't handle it, and it actually ended up shattering and just exploding. So that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Weird things are going to happen. Of course, not to be, don't approach these with fear, but even still, weird things can happen. So be prepared for that.
Be aware.
It'll be fun.
Yeah. Even awesome things can happen too. Hopefully those happen more often than, more disastrous things like, your glass candle holder exploding, or a flame just suddenly flaring up out of nowhere and catching something on fire.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I mean, technically, if it was that close, you shouldn't really be lighting a fire that close anyway, but even still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not like it's going to explode or anything.
Hopefully not. Yeah. But in either way, it's being able to control these elements or putting them in a more contained place, very important. And even in the same vein, even the opposite is true. Sometimes you want to bring an element in to work with it. So instead of doing the banishing ritual of the pentagram, you do the lesser invoking ritual of the pentagram. So you bring those elements in to be a lot more easily interfaced with. But of course, once you're done with the elements, you also want to know how to banish them too, because you bring those in, you start doing your work, and then you continue to go out through your day outside of ritual. Those elements are still there. So because things in life, lots of things can happen. You don't want them to be easily accessed, or something kind of trips you up for whatever reason. Then of course the elements can react. There are many different possibilities. We can be here all day talking about them.
Right.
But yeah, so which is why banishing and invoking, that's going to be one of your basic, if not your tools that you're going to carry with the rest of your life, if not beyond eternity too. Of course, probably beyond eternity. I see no reason not to. carry these with us.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in any case, back to cause and effect. So as the Kybalion says here, so every cause has an effect, every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to law. Chance is but a name for law not recognized. There are many planes of causation, but nothing escapes the law. So this principle embodies the fact that there is a cause for every effect, an effect from every cause. It explains that everything happens according to law. Nothing ever merely happens. There is no such thing as chance, that while there are various planes of cause and effect, the higher dominating the lower planes, still nothing ever entirely escapes the law. The Hermetists understand the art and methods of rising above the ordinary plane of cause and effect, to a certain degree, and by mentally rising to a higher plane, they become causers instead of effects. So again, once again, back to the whole polarization, right? Someone just mention, say, like a sport team to like its opposing team, watch them go off, right? Politics as well. You mention, say, the Republican Party to someone who's a Democrat, watch them go off if they do, or vice versa, the Democrat Party to a conservative or Republican, right? This is that's a way to be the cause of something and have someone under your effect, right? And of course, we got to be careful too, as well, whether it's from other people, whether it's from events. Always be aware of that. So again, try to be depolarized, and if you can't, for whatever reason, keep an eye on it. So where was I reading from this? So yeah, the Hermetists understand the art of methods of rising above. Where we got there? Oh, yeah. So the masses of people are carried along, obedient to environment, the wills and desires of others stronger than themselves, heredity, that I mispronounced that, suggestion, and other outward causes moving them about like pawns on the chessboard of life. But the masters rising to the plane above dominate their moods, characters, qualities, and powers, as well as the environment surrounding them, and become movers instead of pawns. They help to play the game of life instead of being played and moved by other wills and environments. They use the principle instead of being its tools. The masters obey the causation of the higher planes, but they help to rule on their own plane. In this statement, there is condensed a wealth of Hermetic knowledge. Let him read who can. So yeah, cause and effect, simple, straightforward, but it's still an important thing to remember, right? Make sure that you're the one that's influencing everything else and not the other way around. Now, of course, sometimes, something good can influence you. It's like, oh, hey, take this opportunity. You can, gain a lot of good things from this. And it's like, yeah, sure. Yeah, go ahead and go for it. Right. Of course, in the same way, it's also important to say, like, it's a good way to kind of look out for like scams too. Like, they're like, oh, hey, it's like, hey, if you come sign up for this, and do this, you'll get this. But then of course it's like, you got to keep an eye on, it's like, okay, hang on. They said they're going to give me $1 million if I, give them my personal ID and whatnot. And then of course, identity theft happens. That's just one example. So always keep an eye on how things influence you and whether you want to allow them to influence you or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you got to have some common sense along with with all of this, right?
Yeah. So yeah, that would be cause and effect and correspondences. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you for this good knowledge that we are all magicians. So we need to if we haven't already, begin to learn how to harness our power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep, that's the update on Magick for today. And we look forward to continuing down this journey so we can start doing our own magic rituals.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That'll be fun.
The heart of the series.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll see you all next time. Thank you for listening.